Welcome to Wellbeing with Manny in conversation with. What we hear and listen to throughout our day can shape how we feel. If we feed and nourish our soul with wholesome conversations from everyday people, filled with positive stories, we may feel less alone and even inspired. We're all working through our own stuff, and sometimes you need to hear that you are doing amazing, which you are. Wellbeing with Manny in conversation with is listening to others talk about how they have journeyed life so far, how they keep their well-being in check, and how they keep their mindset positive. This is not always possible, but sometimes they share some really good tips on how they improve their well-being just for those days when they're not feeling quite the ticket. Welcome to this Wellbeing with Manny in conversation with community. I really just wanted to build something special that people can feel part of, feel seen, and feel valued. Some of the people we speak to have really inspirational stories, and hopefully it can resonate with you, make you stop, reflect, and also just pick up some top tips along the way. So thank you again for being here, and thanks for sharing your time with us. Here's the show. Hi everyone, just jumping in to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this series of Wellbeing with Manny in conversation with, and that's the amazing IA Hair and Beauty. Now, I don't know about you, but as someone who has a very busy life with lots going on, an hour hair or beauty appointment can feel like a real treat, an absolute essential, non-negotiable bit of self-care. Sometimes I know that all I need is a fresh French manicure to make me feel a bit brighter. I don't think we should underestimate these little acts of kindness and the impact that they have in our busy lives. So we have a special treat for you, a 15% one-time code across all the IA Hair and Beauty range. So if that's a gel polish or beautiful nail art, and you just need to jump over to Instagram to see the amazing nail art that Isabel does, or a fresh new trim or colour, then IA Hair and Beauty is the best. Go to IA Hair and Beauty on Instagram or Facebook and DM Isabel quoting the podcast for your 15% off treat. Enjoy! Hello, welcome back to Wellbeing with Manny in conversation with. You're very welcome here with us today. So today is our very, very special bonus episode. See what I give you for free each week. It's our special bonus episode, and for me, it's going to be really special because we're not just kind of interviewing any old person. We're interviewing my very, very dear friend Nicola Karunaratne-Diver, who has very kindly given up her time today to chat to us, and it is just going to be a couple of Egypts having a chat, isn't it?
That's what we do. That's how we roll.
That is how we roll. So thank you very much for coming. So I always start with, what does well-being mean to you? No, I don't. What I start with is, do you want to just tell everybody who you are, what it is you do, that kind of thing?
So I'm Nicola Karunaratne-Diver, but as you said, known as Nic KD. I live here in St Helens with my husband Gerard and our 6-year-old daughter Grace, known collectively as the KDs.
The KDs.
Collectively and affectionately.
Very affectionately.
Known as the KDs. Gerard and I have been married for almost 10 years now, but have been together for many, many more than that. We've been together since we were teenagers, and came here on the boat, not the proverbial boat, the actual boat to England to build a new life. And we've been here for about 18 years. So I've been here almost as long as I was ever in Ireland, because I left when I was 18. So by September this year, I'll have been here longer than I was ever in Ireland.
That's amazing.
Yeah, which is a bit weird.
And does it feel like home?
Very much so. Very much so. When I go back to Ireland now, although it's sort of my ancestral home in that sense, when I go there, it feels different now. But when I'm here, I feel like this is where my home is. And I think especially after we had Grace, that sort of cemented our roots here.
Yeah.
So there's no going back then.
Good.
Like, she is the most St Helens person in the world ever.
She is.
Yeah.
I can verify that. and we love her. So before I ask you about what does wellbeing mean to you, I just want to just check in with the people listening and watching. This is why I wanted it to be the bonus episode, because it's going to be a very special episode. We are going to discuss some quite heavy topics, but really important and special topics as far as we're concerned. And they'll include grief, and that's child bereavement and pet grief. We are also probably going to touch upon body image, relationships with food. We may even talk about things to do with race and ethnicity. So for us, we just wanted to shout that out, so that if you're feeling like any of those are going to trigger anything for you, perhaps maybe just leave it until a day where you feel a bit stronger. But it's really important to have these conversations, and it's important to talk about things that help other people, and that's one of the reasons that we wanted to record us talking about these things, which we talk about quite often. They're not out of the ordinary.
Oh no, they're not new topics for us, because we like to go heavy, we like to go deep. Like.
we do, and we'll get into some of that in a bit, and how much we celebrate that as well, actually. So yeah, let's start with what does well-being mean to you?
I've been thinking about it for days, because obviously I know it's the one question that you're going to ask, and I was trying to find the one thing, but I think for me it's many things. The short answer is that I keep a gratitude journal. So well-being for me means that I get into bed every night and I've got something to put in that journal, that I've got something that happened that day that I'm grateful for. And that can be something really big, like a big life decision, or something that's like significant has happened within our home, or it can be that I had a really nice cup of coffee in the morning watching the birds. It can be something like really, really big or really, really small. But as long as I've got something to put in that gratitude journal, I feel like that means I'm doing well. That I'm doing okay. And then my other big one is reading. That if I know that when my mental health is not great, I find it very hard to read. So when I am reading and I'm getting loads of pleasure out of loads of different books, then I know that I'm doing okay. And then I know that it's because all the other things that I'm doing in the background are making me be okay to be able to read.
Yeah, I love that. And for those people who haven't had the pleasure of going to your house, Nic has the best little reading corner. So there's a really cute chair and little bookshelves on the back, and it's a really important place for you, that, isn't it?
It is, because it's my corner of our home, and when I'm in that corner, I can it's sort of under the stairs, so a bit like Harry Potter. And we joke about it in our house, because Grace does love Harry Potter. But when I'm in that corner, I can see everyone else in the house. I can see what they're doing, and I can see Gerard does like adult colouring in. He loves doing it, and that's his thing that helps his mental health. So when I'm sat in my corner, I can see him doing his colouring in. I can see Grace watching the television. I can see the dog and the cats like mooching about the place. But I'm safe in that corner. Nothing can come up behind me, because I know that there's nothing there, and I can see anything that's coming towards me. And it just, when I can get the cat off the chair, it's nice to be able to sit in there and have some time.
When you can get the carpet. And far be it from me to pass up an opportunity to put a musical theatre reference in, so do excuse me. But when you said I've got my own little corner, loads of people in the musical theatre industry who are listening to this will be now singing "In My Own Little Corner, in My Own Little Room," which is from Cinderella. Anyway, I digress. So I love that about you. So for me, one of the most amazing things about being your friend is knowing your kind of transformational journey and how far you've come in terms of reprioritizing what you do every day that serves you well. And there's so little around in your life that can affect you anymore, because you kind of architect. No, that's not the right word, but you're kind of a real architect of what you do in your family.
Yeah, at some point, I sort of, the point, and you know, this is where the trigger warning comes in. When my son Malcolm died when he was 3 days old, and that was the catalyst for so many changes that came after that. But one of the things that came after his death was that I became non-negotiable about people taking the piss. I'm not having it. I'm not here for it. I don't do it to other people, and I won't tolerate other people doing it to me. And I became very firm in that. When I think for the years and years before that I just took stuff, just took it on the chin, took it on the nose, just kept my head down, tried not to upset anyone, bit my tongue, swallowed it down. And then that happened, but the world ended for us. And then we had to rebuild. And I thought, if I'm going to rebuild a life, I'm going to rebuild a better life. And all those people that had been sort of like circling, I just said no. And there's a power in being able to just say no. And it's, you know, that's a very oversimplified way of putting it, because it's really, really hard. And we had like family relationships that were not helpful to either my husband or I, and we reached a point where we said to certain people, we need to implement some boundaries. So these are the boundaries that we want, like, don't phone at this time, don't do this, don't do that. And those people said, no, we don't want to respect those boundaries. And we said that, okay, well, we're going to end contact and we'll reassess in 6 months and see how we feel. We went back 6 months later and said, actually, we feel like life has been quite peaceful and drama free, so we're going to maintain the relationship as it is now with no contact. And it's a little bit easier for us because we're in a different country to a lot of our family and the people that we've put those boundaries in with. But it's hard, but it's worth doing, because you've got to prioritize yourself first. And you're not there to be a doormat for other people. You're not there to be an emotional punching bag for other people. And when you spend a life where people tell you all the things that you are and all the things that you can't do, you deserve better than that. So I've always said, and I know I've said it to you before, the day that Malcolm died, I died, and I died. Whoever I was then, she died, and then I was reborn after that. And I was reborn as someone who is very clear about what I will and will not tolerate. And I have no tolerance policy now for shite.
And it's one of the massive things that I absolutely love about you. I learned from you so much, because I think my boundaries have got better as I've got older, but they still can be a bit dodgy, and I can still be so informed by what other people want to do and what other people want to say and how other people want to shape my life. And so we'll probably come back to that, but I'd love to just, obviously, I don't want any of that moment to pass without really talking about Malcolm. We, as a kind of friendship group here, have celebrated his life every year with a little kind of buffet, as we call it. Eat all you can, which is what happens when we're around, with a cake, to make sure that Malcolm's memory is never forgotten. So, you know, for you to be able to build back from that is incredible. If you feel like you can, and thank you for wanting to share this, like, you just to make everyone aware, you really want to share this, don't you, for other people as well.
After Malcolm had died, I was very lucky, and I got to go to the Alder Centre, and I had specific child bereavement counselling for about, I think maybe about 9 months after he had died. I didn't have to wait very long to access that service. I am very fortunate that I got in the door when I did, and they took me through the worst of it and the darkest of it. And one of the things that happened when I went is I could not say his name. It could not, and I didn't know how to speak to people about how my baby had died, or that my baby had died. And when I felt like when I met new people that I had to tell them, because I needed them to know why I was the way I was. Where sometimes I would just bust out crying, and sometimes I would say that I was going to be somewhere, and then I couldn't face it, and I needed people to understand why. And I now know that actually I don't need other people to understand why. And sometimes I know people for a while before I tell them, because actually to know Malcolm is privileged information to me now. Whereas at the time, I just said it to anybody, and I would tell people in the shop, like you know, because it was just there at the tip of my tongue all the time. But I was sort of drowning in the grief of it at the same time. So to be able to say his name and to be able to talk about him is to honor him, and you know, he was alive for 3 days. He had a life, you know, and that's what's sort of taboo about the whole thing, is that people don't talk about it. And then I remember reading a book by a girl called Elle Wright called Ask Me His Name, and it was about the birth and the death of her son Teddy. And it was very, like, the timeline was very similar, the circumstances were very similar. And you know, she talks a lot in that about if someone's baby has died, like, you talking about babies or asking about them is not going to upset them. They already think about that baby every single minute of every single day. And that's, I think about him all the time. So to me then, like, when we have that birthday party for him every year, that's one of our non-negotiables as a family, and it's one of our most sacred traditions, because it helps us that he was here, and he's not here now, but his sister and his sister's friends get to eat birthday cake, and that's what you should do when it's somebody's birthday. So it's more harmful when people don't acknowledge it. And so it was 2014, so he would have been 8 on his last birthday. So as time has gone on, obviously people forget, or the impact of it obviously is sort of always devastating for us, but not so much for other people. So like I really noticed this time around that there was people who didn't message me when it was his birthday or his anniversary to just to say, like, you know, how you doing. And it's hard to not get sort of bogged down and to start listing all the people who never asked you if you were okay. But I try to not focus on that, and instead I think about all the people who did, and the people who asked me, who messaged me on the day and said, are you okay? The people who you know, had birthday cake, the people who sort of like sent me little hearts and stuff. Those are the people, and they do it every year, and they'll continue to do it every year. So those are the people that matter to me and to us as a family. Those are the people that help us to keep his memory alive. And the other people, I'm not saying, like, you know, to help them, but you know, there's an impact to behaviour. So when you forget those sorts of anniversaries for people, like, it does have an impact on the person who's grieving. Because I at the time thought, well, like, he is dead, and then I will have this counselling, and then I'll be okay, and then it'll be fine. And it turns out that that's not what happens. So the grief is not linear at all. And that was a hard lesson to learn, because I had never really, like, my mother's mother had died when my mother was a teenager. So I didn't have any grandparents growing up. So I've never really had an experience of bereavement. And it's brutal anyway when you lose someone that you love. But then when you've lost a baby, people, they don't know what to say, and they don't know what to do. But we didn't either.
Of course.
You know, we were clueless. And in the middle of all that, then we had these sort of like family relationships that weren't fantastic, and were making things much more difficult. So that was the point where we started to sort of say, we need a bit of time and space to deal with this. And my husband in particular, he had to just sort of step away, and he went back to work quite quickly. He went back to work a week later, because he, at the time, not that he doesn't know, but at the time he worked in a really, really supportive, lovely place. And they said, you take as much time as you need, but after a week he went back. And I'd been off on maternity leave, but I'd been signed off. So when I was 20 weeks pregnant, we'd gone for our anomaly scan, and there was an anomaly, which you just like, it happens to other people, but it doesn't happen to you. And even now, when someone says that they're pregnant and they sort of like talk about the 20-week scan as their gender scan, there's a part of me inside that thinks that's not what it's for. Because it was never that for us then. I was signed off straight away. So I ended up starting my maternity leave much earlier than planned. And then I took my full maternity leave, but then in the middle of all that, there was redundancies, and I didn't have in me to fight for my job.
Yeah.
And I could not I couldn't just walk back into a life that I lived before, because I was so different.
So changed.
But I didn't know who I was or what I was going to do. So I took redundancy and left. So I ended up not going back to work for about, I think, over 3 years. Then in the meantime, I went on to have Grace. But it was sort of disappointing in a way to figure out that you can't just, I just decided, well, like they said, because I'd had a C-section, they said I had to wait 6 months before I could start trying. And I thought, well, I'll be pregnant again quite quickly. So I have until I'm pregnant again to deal with this. It backfired on me big time, by the way. I did have that initial counselling, which was great, but then it all sort of like came. Then by the time I was pregnant with Grace, I kept thinking, I am handling this remarkably well. I am doing really, really well. Not so much. No, not so much. Like I just said to you before, if, like a duck. On a pond, it's like and underneath like this. I was manic, absolutely manic. So then, luckily, I had a really, really good GP who recognised that, and he said, "Let's have some support." Now he offered me antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication, which I refused to take because I was worried about the harm to Grace. So I ended up. I had an appointment with him every week. He said, "I want to see you every single week." And then that's amazing. And then he organised counselling for me within my GP surgery, and then he managed to get me on a CBT course as well. So I was doing all 3 of those. So basically, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I had contact with somebody. And that helped. It went a long way. But I then like sort of had Grace and was in this like wonderful little bubble with her, and I. In all honesty, now when I like sort of reflect back on the whole journey, I only really started to deal with my grief of losing Malcolm when Grace went to school. That was when it like hit big style, because I think in between, like there was such a short period of time from when he died to when I was pregnant with her, and then I was sort of so distracted in the pregnancy by worry, by anxiety, and like at the height of it, like because he was cremated and took his ashes home, so at the worst of it, I had cleared a space beside his ashes for the ashes of the other baby, because I was just almost accepting of the fact that I was never going to take a baby home. And like we live in a 2-bedroom house, so like the other bedroom had been like decorated as a nursery, and we were living with that this whole time. And it like when we talk about body image, like it's one thing to face your postpartum body. Your postpartum body is hard. It's hard anyway. But it's hard but the price you pay for it when you look at yourself and you don't recognise yourself, and then you look at the baby next to you. But when you look and there's no baby there, you just think, wow. And I really in that, and I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I'm just getting myself healthy again to have another pregnancy. I punished my body. And I'd had a C-section. I had a difficult pregnancy, and then I'd had a C-section, and then within about 6 or 8 weeks, I was doing double aerobics classes. I was in so much pain, so much physical pain, and so much emotional pain, but I just couldn't. It was too much. It was far too much. So I just, when I think about it now, it was awful. It was awful. I should have just. I should have stopped, but then you don't. But by the time Grace went to school, I thought, oh, something is not right. I thought I need to deal with this big style now, and that was when the work began. And it's hard work and it's tough work. But now that I've done it, I accept the fact that I'm going to have to always do it. And that was the thing that I thought, like, someone dies and then you cry, it was really sad, and then that's it. But actually that's not it. It's not. It's because I sometimes liken my grief to a backpack, so I put it on every day, like and some days it's quite light, and other days it is very, very heavy. And the days, so like when it's his birthday, I don't actually feel extra especially sad that day.
No.
Probably because I have quite a lot of distraction and nice friends.
You do our party.
And even when it's his anniversary, I accept.
It's a moment that happens, but it isn't anything. I can imagine it isn't anything heavier than what you live with every day, no matter what.
And it's a truth that I walk in every day. Like so that's like you know that day just comes and goes. And Gerard and I always take a few days off work and just sort of like get together and sort of reconnect. And it's hard to parent a living child. It's harder to parent a dead child. We were always very careful with Grace about the sort of language that we used and how we talked about him, and I never wanted her to feel like she was sort of in the shadow of a dead sibling. And but Grace is an extraordinary child, so she has grasped it, you know, and she understands so completely, like that he is a member of our family, but he is just not there with us every day. So the way that she is about it makes it much easier for me sometimes. But then there's things, so when we talk about boundaries, there's things like in September when the kids go back to school and everybody puts their pictures on Facebook of their kids in their school uniforms. It's amazing. It's so amazing, but it hurts. Of course me. It does. It hurts me so much, and I can't bear to look at it. I just can't. So for a long time, I was just did it to myself, like punishing myself. And then I realized that I had a choice. I actually didn't have to do it. So then, without announcement, without any sort of fanfare, just 1 September, I just thought, I'm actually just going to take the Facebook app off my phone for a few days to just while the kids go back to school. Wow, one light bulb moment. So I now know the things that I have to do to help myself. And on the days when I do feel like a bit weepy, or you know, I feel things, I allow myself to feel them. And if there's days then where I think, like, I'm supposed to do this and I really don't feel up to it, just say, look, I'm having a bit of a rough day and I don't feel up to it. And if you're doing something with another person and you go to them and say that, and you know they are negative about that, that's on them, not on you. You know, so I think for a long time I tried to sort of had a script of all the things that I would say or could say, and on the face of it I was very, very open about what had happened, but actually I was just repeating the same 3 or 4 things over and over again, and they were very controlled. Whereas now I am actually open about it. It is messy and it's heartbreaking, and sometimes it's disgusting, sometimes it's awful, sometimes it's a black hole and you think I'm never going to get out of it, and then some days it's okay. So some days I accept it as my truth, and that's fine. But it's about managing my own expectations. I know now that actually that's okay. So I any sort of linear sort of grieving process, and you know when they talk about cycles of grief, nonsense, absolute nonsense. Because like, and people told me time will heal. No, it won't.
It doesn't.
All that happens is time passes and other people stop messaging you when it's his anniversary. That's what happens. Time hasn't healed anything. It still hurts as much now. It's sort of every time it would have been his first, so like every time he would have been going to school.
It's full of them.
And I you know, it's a thing that affects so many women. So it's like the statistics are 1 in 4 women will have a miscarriage, a stillbirth, or neonatal death, which is when a baby dies within the first 28 days of life. Like, that's massive. That's massive. Huge. Every single person knows 4 women. So, and I found when it happened, when he died, like I had other people telling me things that they had never shared with anybody. I remember a lady that I know who lives locally, and she's in her 80s, and she told me that her first child had been stillborn and then just taken away from her. She never knew if the baby was a boy or a girl. She wasn't allowed to name the baby, nothing. And then they just told her, you'll be okay, you're young, you'll have another baby, and then off we go. And she's carried that. So whereas I was sort of like, whisked up and taken to the Alder Centre and given all this specific like bereavement counselling, given so much support. She was just sort of given a pat on the back and told, like, don't worry, you'll try again. There's like, if anybody picks about it in their family history, you'll find some woman who's like Gerard and I always laugh, you know, in like Criminal Minds and stuff, when there's a woman who just like goes berserk and starts killing people, always because she lost a baby. Like, and there's like so many like Dolly Parton songs about like wild women that just like took to the mountains and just howl at the moon, still lost a baby. Like, you know, it becomes a sort of a catch-all, I mean, for, you know, insanity, because that is how it feels. Like, and you sort of, I did reach a point where I thought I could just retreat into myself and I could just sort of lounge about all day, and if anybody questions it, I'll just say, well, like my baby died, like, so you know, I can do whatever I want. Do that, so then you have a choice about sort of what you're going to do.
But I'm interested to know, I mean, obviously everybody watching and listening is now realizing why I wanted you to come on and talk about this, because you are, you know, to call you an inspiration is just an absolute understatement. Like, I mean, obviously I'm like honored to be a friend, so I like get to see the amazingness every day, but honestly I'm just totally in awe of how you talk about it and how you make, like, as you say in your words, made the choice. And I wonder how you did that. You know, this is, you know, I can only imagine it's just one of the worst evils that life can give you, and you make a choice that isn't going to define you. You know, like, how do you even get to the point where you go, yeah, I could just stay in my pajamas all day and just do nothing, but actually I've decided I'm gonna live, you know, I'm gonna live my life. Like, how does that even come for you?
So have you watched This Is Us?
Yes.
Yeah. So in the opening episode, they talk about like taking the sourest lemon that life can give you, and then making something that's even remotely drinkable. So, you know, Gerard and I we've been together a long time, and then we had to rediscover who we were as parents, as bereaved parents, as separate individuals together. And like, part of the healing came when we found other people who'd been through something similar.
Yes.
So it's now a very, very cherished friend, Kelly, had, at the time, she had set up a charity called Jensen's Twinkle Stars in memory of her son Jensen, who had been stillborn. She had two other children so Jaden was older, and then she had Jensen, and then she went on to have Jacob. But Jaden in particular really struggled, and there was no support in the whole of the Northwest for him as a child who had lost a sibling. So she set up a charity, and part of what they did, they had like weekly sessions where you would go and you would sort of talk about grief and loss, but through arts and crafts and such different things. So then I went, Grace was about 6 months old. She had no idea what was going on. But I went and I found a tribe of women who had been through something the same as I had. And on the days where you felt like you could talk about it, they understood. But on the days when you felt like you couldn't, they also understood. So that was a massive healing for us. And we would go as a family, but then I had started to develop this friendship with Kelly as well, which that would always be my advice to anyone who goes through it. Anything is find your tribe, because those are the people who've been through it before you, are the people who are going to tell you how you're going to get through tomorrow. Because there's days, and I remember it, like in the hours after he had died, being in the bathroom in the hospital room with Gerard, and just sitting looking at Gerard's watch, just watching the seconds ticking by. And he was saying to me, I don't know how we're going to get through this. We don't have to get through this. You have to get through this second, and then the next second, and the next second. And so some days I count my days in hours, and then sometimes if I have to, I count it in minutes. But that's okay. You know, you just have to do what feels good for you. And everybody's going to sort of negotiate it like differently. But nobody's an expert on child loss or child bereavement. But other women go through it. So, you know, once you find those women, it gives you a better sort of vocabulary to be able to talk about it. And we ended up, Kelly ended up, she disbanded the charity in the end, simply because her sort of own like dreams for herself grew and her family grew, but like I remain really, really good friends with her. But there's, people don't talk about it, and when it happened, there were so many people that said, in the most well-meaning way, but people said, oh well, you know, because he would have been poorly, so like at least he isn't suffering. Like, well, I'd still rather see him alive, thanks very much. And people told us, like, you're young, you'll have more children.
And they're like, if you can call them well-meaning, but it isn't what you want to hear. But
I thought, by the time I had Grace, I thought, well, people are right, we will have more children. So then I had Grace, and I was like, so at what point is this the gnawing emptiness going to feel like it's filled? And it didn't, because I had to accept the fact then that there is a hole.
There is a gap.
And that hole is distinctly a Malcolm-shaped hole. So no Graces can fill it.
No.
Because it's nothing to do with Grace.
Yes.
So I think the acceptance of this is a thing that's happened. And I like remember reading somewhere about women sort of, so I would find then that women who'd had a miscarriage would say, well, like, it's nothing like what you've been through. But that's like saying, like, if someone drowned in 2 inches of water or 2 feet of water, like they're both still as drowned as each other. Like it's all and they're very distinct, different losses. But like it's all sort of in the one pot. And at the end of the day, like if you want to be a mother and you've been pregnant and then you don't have a baby at the end of it, then like, you know, I stand in allegiance with every other woman who's been in that position, whether they lost their baby when they were 12 weeks pregnant or when their baby grew up and was 30 and then was killed. Like, you know, nobody knows how to navigate it. Everybody's only sort of trying to like fumble their way through. But if you can sort of like claw onto other people to sort of drag you through it makes it so much easier.
And that's why community is so important. And you know, I call this a community quite often, you know, what I'm trying to build here, because you know, there will be people listening who absolutely identify and resonate with what you're saying. And it's just helpful to hear, you know, especially because some people could be in a particularly dark place right now, to hear that people can get through this. And it's not get through and it doesn't exist, it exists, it's with you, like you say, it's your backpack that you wear every day. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, because you know, it's amazing that you feel that you can share that on this space, and we as a community, as I say, really appreciate it. One of the things that I'd love to ask you as well is after Malcolm died, one of the things that you talk about is how you got your gorgeous dog Speedy, Speedy G, who lives on again in legend with us, and how that really kind of played out, because that is also something that I think people don't talk about enough, which is the other parts of grief. You know, people feel it in different ways, but pet grief, I think, is something that isn't talked about as well as a lot of things. And some people can see that as a real hierarchy, you know, there's humans and there's pets, but pets are very much part of people's family. And if anybody's been to Nick's house like I have, there are pets that, you know,
they're just getting
live in status like humans. So just remember Speedy to us and what he meant to you.
So after Malcolm had died, I was on maternity leave. I was just like, my mum had been here, and then she had sort of had to go back to her own life, and Gerard got back to work, and then I was a bit like, what now? What am I doing with myself now? And I just thought that this like is grim. Like it's really, really like, and you know, all my friends, like I was 27, so like all my friends were like, they were all at work all day. So I was all day just sort of like farting about the house on my own, like trying not to drive myself demented. And then my one of my very best friends, Danielle, my soul sister, she had said to me one day she was going to the Merseyside Dogs Home to look at a German Shepherd that she'd seen online. So she said, "Well, come with me, like just, you know, get you out of the house."
Dangerous words.
And I said, all right, okay. So I thought I'll just go for the drive. And Danielle was one of those friends in all of this who, like, she came to the hospital in the hours after Malcolm had died to be with me, and she was always just with me. She never, so when people say things like, "Oh, well, at least," or she never did that. She just said, "What do you need?" And if I said, "And I need you to be quiet," she would be quiet. If I said, "I need you to hold me," she'd hold me. She always asked what I needed, and then she always gave me just that. So she said, "Come on, let's go for a little drive." And I was, yeah, okay. So we went to Merseyside Dogs Home. We were like up and down, and there was a really sort of like bullshit chihuahua called Senior Fajita in this cage, and then behind, so they must, the way they name the dogs, they must sort of like pick a theme and go with it. So there was Senior Fajita, and there was another dog in behind him, so he was like strutting up and down the cage, and everybody was like, "Oh my god, look at that chihuahua." And then in the back, on a little raised bed, sat in a puddle of his own piss, trembling. It was a little Yorkshire Terrier. I'll just be taking him home then. And so we did. So they said, "Okay, like, you can't just take him home right now. We're going to do some checks and stuff." So I said to Danielle, "Will you bring me back tomorrow, like, so I can get him?" She said, "Yeah, of course I will." So she left empty-handed, and I left with the paperwork for Speedy G. So then by the time we took him home, that was a game changer, really.
Yeah.
Because then I had a reason and a necessity to go out.
To get out every day.
So I started to go out, and although, like, I lived in my community for a long time, I'd been, like, I worked in Liverpool city centre, and I worked full time. So I, like, would sort of in and out on the train, and I didn't really sort of spend a lot of time in my actual local community. So then, like, all of a sudden you're out in the park, and when you've got a dog, then all the other dog walkers, and then you start to make friends with people, and then there was a number of sort of people who had got puppies at about the same time. So they sort of, although Speedy was a bit older, he was a puppy to us because he was new to us, and he was so anxious, and they were never quite sure what had happened to him. They didn't think that he'd been abused, more that he'd been, like, sort of neglected or abandoned. So we had a lot of work to do with him, and then he ended up at some point in his life, he'd had kennel cough that hadn't been treated, so he had real bad scarring on his lungs. He had the dog equivalent of COPD. So he was then medically exercise intolerant. So he had an inhaler we used to have once a day, and I used to push him in a puppy stroller. And
please, you have to tell us the story of the woman who saw him in the puppy stroller, what she said. That's one of my favourite Nic KD stories of all time.
Which one?
Who said she'd never seen a dog in?
She was like outside Taylor Park Quota. I've never seen anything like. Oh my god! In all my years, I've never seen anything like this. I was going, "You haven't lived." if that's the most outrageous thing that you've seen.
Yeah, a dog in a stroller.
So when after I'd had Grace, I had Grace in a poos, like a sling until she was about 18 months old. So I'd have Grace in the sling, and I'd have the dog in the stroller. He's doing my laps at Taylor Park, and it's always middle-aged men. I was going to say something. Got that the wrong way around, love. Like, what, you want me to put the dog in the harness? Because he'd be quite happy. Like,
yeah, he would.
Love it. Like, so
I love that.
Speedy just he brought a bit of light into a very dark house, and it got me out, and then it got me and Gerard out. And we got to a point then where we were able to have a conversation about trying again. Right? And so and my mum always says, like, from the day that Malcolm died, I cried every day. And when she went back to Ireland, I phoned her every day crying. And the first day that I didn't phone her crying was the day that we brought Speedy G home, because I phoned her laughing. So he was the sort of
he was
thing that sort of put us back on the path to some sort of like joy or happiness.
Yeah.
And then when Grace came, because like he was a rescue dog, and you're always a bit wary about how they're going to be with children, and it was like she was his. And so many pictures of, like, when she was a baby and she'd been napping, and he was just always on guard. And then because I breastfed her, but she was very much a night feeder, So my very rude husband would be asleep all night.
Gerard.
And I used to just put one hand out and Speedy would just be there beside me. And he was my constant companion. He was never not by my side. And then sort of as Grace got older, he was so extraordinarily patient with him. And we sort of like Gerard laughs about it now. He's like, oh, Saint Speedy G. But he was such a good boy. He was the very best boy. And I say past tense because Speedy has also died. Yeah. So Speedy was attacked and killed in a totally unprovoked attack by a German Shepherd that lives on our road. It was horrific, absolutely horrific. And it sort of bubbled everything back up for us in a lot of ways because
of the major reason that Speedy changed the course of it.
The only reason we had Speedy was because Malcolm had died. Yeah. So the whole
thing was intertwined.
It was almost like losing Malcolm all over again because we had lost Speedy. Yeah. And then the sort of and that was the difference when Malcolm had died. It was nobody's fault. No. It was nobody's fault. You know, he had a heart condition. It was a 1 in 10,000 chance that any baby's going to be born with this heart condition. I know someone who was born with the exact same heart condition, who is now a gorgeous young personal trainer. Yeah, in her 20s. Like, you know, it was bad luck. It was really bad luck. But what happened to Speedy was aggressive and violent and unnecessary. And that was the thing so then I had an anger that I'd never experienced anger like that before in my life. And it was both a driving force because there was things then that needed to be done after Speedy had died because the person responsible needed to be held responsible. Yeah. And then, you know, we ended up accruing a vet bill of £10,000 and that needed to be dealt with. So the anger was a bit of a driving force, which was useful. But then when all of that was done, I was still just left with this. And it felt like I've never had heartburn, but it felt like what I imagine heartburn must feel like, but all the time. Yeah. And then the sort of anger of what happened was wrapped up in his death. So I couldn't separate the two long enough to grieve for him. And then every time I turned around, he wasn't there. And I just didn't know what to do. And then people say it's just a dog.
Just a dog?
No, it really isn't. And I know when some people say talk about things like fur babies, other people cringe, but they do. That is what they are. Yeah. You know, they've become this huge part of your life. And really my whole day was structured around Speedy. So Speedy needs to go for his walk, Speedy needs to get his inhaler, Speedy needs to do this. So then what am I supposed to do with my time? And then previous to that, we had a cat called Roland, who was just, he was an amazing cat. He was a Burmese cross, the most gorgeous blue eyes. And the reason I picked him in cat's protection was because his blue eyes reminded me of my husband. But he had lived a very lovely life with us. And then we had to make the decision to send him over the Rainbow Bridge because his kidneys were failing. And I remember at the time, Gerard and I and Grace were with him. We were holding him. They gave him the stuff in the IV and he went to sleep. And then that was it. He was gone. Yeah. And I remember thinking, this is the worst thing in the world ever. How can life be so cruel? Turns out it can be a bit crueler. Because with Speedy, because he had been attacked, we rushed straight up to the hospital. And I handed him over. It was in the middle of COVID, so I never saw him again. That was it. They just took him, and then that was it. We got his ashes back 2 weeks later. We never got to say goodbye. Yeah. And they did say you can come in and see him because he had survived the night. The vet to this day still says she has no idea. Just sheer force of will to just live for us, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
But he had a massive cardiac arrest the next thing, and they tried to resuscitate him and they couldn't. And she said you can come and see him, but I'd really question whether or not that's the right thing to do. So I took her advice on that. She knows. Yeah. So it broke my heart and I never got to see him again. I was just consumed with an anger. And then a hatred towards another human being that I'd never felt before. And even on
didn't really align with you as a person.
And it felt very uncomfortable. And I just thought, I can't continue like this. Which is when I started to think, like, God, maybe I need a bit of help. But like, there's not much help if you've lost your dog, like, you know, which is quite sad, really.
And lost your dog in the way that you did, and also with what Speedy symbolized to you as a family.
And then I'd sort of gone to because the local councillors and the police were very involved. I'd asked if there was any way to access support, and they said no. So we were sort of left to source our own. So I ended up going to see a wonderful lady called Les Roberts, who practices in St Helens Town Centre, and I saw Les for some hypnotherapy. So I went and I told Les what happened, and she said, like we can do some work here. So we did, and we did a lot of work in a very short space of time. So I had some like sort of like counselling sessions with Les, and then we had I did some hypnotherapy, and then that started to work. And then I started that sort of, so what part of what Les did was help me visualize to go back to a place where I was able to say goodbye to Speedy in a sort of respectful and dignified way.
In your way.
And then once I'd done that, I was able to sort of release it. And for a long time afterwards, I still felt very angry. I don't now, because I sort of, the same as with Malcolm, I accept it, it's my truth. And I have to look at the positives. So that sort of driving anger that I had initially, it allowed me to do some things. So we were able to like come to agreement about settling the bill and about the money. There was a contingent control order put on the dog that attacked Speedy. So that dog, to my knowledge, has never hurt another dog since, which was very important to me. It made the local councillors aware that there was a bit of an ongoing problem on the local park. So we got some new benches and we got some new poo bins and stuff like that. So there were some positives in the sort of wider sense to come out of it. But then it sort of made me realise that I am a resilient person, that I can sort of, sometimes I resent my resilience. I think, why do I have to be so resilient? Why does stuff happen? But that's life. You know, stuff is going to happen. So it sort of comforts me now to know that I've got a toolkit of things because I've been fortunate enough to access like counselling, CBT, hypnotherapy, that I have a toolbox of things now. So when the next big thing comes, and inevitably it will, I know that I've got the tools there to do it. Or when something happens to Grace, I've got the tools to be able to say, you can do this and you can do that. And that's been helpful. And then Gerard went to see Les as well, had some hypnotherapy with her, which was, he had sort of a lot of like childhood trauma really that needed to be dealt with. And I think you can only run away from these things for so long before you're going to face them.
But it's true, and it's such a recurring theme that I talk to people about. It's kind of, some people get so far in their life and then something will happen, or maybe nothing will happen. Something will rear its ugly head, and if there's only so much pushing down you can do, because on one of the other episodes, it's one of the best analogies, I love it, where you push negative feelings down so long they go to the basement and they lift weights. And I love that image because it's so true. We all know that when we don't deal with something, it just becomes bigger and bigger. And like you say, it isn't necessarily dealing with something and moving on, it's dealing with something and accepting that it becomes part of your life, your backpack, your truth.
And because did you ever watch the X-Files?
Not really, but you know, of an age, if you know what that was.
There's an episode, there was like a 2-part episode of the X-Files, where there was basically, he was like a liver-eating mutant that he'd hibernate for 27 years and he'd come out, he'd kill so many people like the liver. But the episode was called Squeeze, because part of the thing was like people would be killed in a locked room. How did he get in? Because he could like sort of squeeze through these little tiny spaces, and his name was Eugene Toombs. So I named my anxiety Eugene Toombs, because although you can be in a perfectly safe locked room, it can squeeze in and it can creep up on you if you don't do all the things. When I think of it in that way, like just sort of like checking the doors and checking the air vents and checking the fireplace, checking all all the little holes and all the little creaky bits. If I do that, it keeps them out.
Yeah.
But as soon as you stop checking and the screws become loose and you get in from the other side, so that's how I sort of visualize it in my mind. As go and watch that episode, and then it'll make sense.
Yeah, amazing. Honestly, people listening and watching this, just they'll be in awe of you, just like I am. And honestly, just sharing that with us is so huge, and I just thank you so much. And what I'd love to kind of leave everyone with is your kind of non-negotiable kind of, these are the things that I could have not done without, you know, to get me to where I am now. So if anybody listening is really feeling, you know, in a place that they feel that they can't crawl out of, what would you say your go-tos they had to have happened for you to be where you are today? So
my non-negotiables as they stand now, if in terms of people, if people cross the line, if people, because I had it, even when Speedy had been killed, I had people, and so it's unsolicited, and that's what bothers me. People offer opinions that I didn't ask for, that weren't helpful. So those people are sort of by the wayside now. So, and I'm not saying that I have to agree with everybody and everybody has to agree with me all the time. But when you're in a difficult situation, like if people are not going to support you, they have no place. And it's very easy to spot people that are worth keeping. Instead of wasting time on relationships that are never going to be anything more than a one-way street, I just like cul-de-sac it. I just cut it off.
I love it.
And then I invest my time and my emotional energy into the relationship that are two-way streets, that are give and take, and that the people that you know that if you phone them at 3 PM or 3 AM, they're going to be there. And like your absolute ride or dies. Like nourish them, forget about everybody else, nourish them. And so I very much whittled down my circle to be the people that I know that absolutely have got my back, and people who are like my friend Alison that I train with at my gym. Like I've always said, she's like my own personal cheerleader. Like you need people like that in your life. That's a non-negotiable for me. Just no shit. Just I'm a no drama llama.
No drama.
And then the other one is movement, exercise. So I had a long history of sort of like dieting and up and down body image, and just like not a good relationship with my own body, and exercising as a form of punishment, really exercising so I could earn food, which is just it's an equation that doesn't add up no matter what way you try and do it. So I sort of ended up after I'd had Grace, and after I'd lost Malcolm, after Malcolm had died, I very much felt like the one thing you're supposed to be able to do as a woman is to have a baby, and I couldn't do that. So this body has just proven everything that I always thought that it was, that it is useless, that it has no value. And those are not correct things. I know that now.
We know that now.
But I really punished myself in between. And then after I'd had Grace, although my pregnancy had been healthy physically, not mentally, by the time I had her, and she was just perfect. I was like, oh my God, I made that came out of me. Like, and then because I had a C-section with her, I'd had 2 C-sections in a very short amount of time, 2 very stressful pregnancies in a short amount of time. And I thought, like, my body needs some time here to heal. And then I started going to it. So I know you've spoken to Ellen Murray. I started going to GlowFit, and that sort of started to like build my strength and my fitness back up. And then because I had this sort of, well, she was maybe like 18 months by the time I started going back to like sort of regular structured exercise. Before that, I'd been doing so much walking with Grace, and I loved it. Like I said, I used to put her in the papoose with Speedy in the stroller, and we used to go and do like 3 or 4 laps at Taylor Park every day. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. Being outside and just moving, and it's like being with the 2 of them, you know, was so lovely. And then I started going to GlowFit, and that then became my time away from being a mum and then I discovered a joy in movement that I had previously never had. Like I'd always been exercising for this specific function of when I step on the scales, it's going to be a lower number, not because I'm moving my body this way, because it's fun. It's
yeah. It feels good.
And then I ended up going, so it was around the corner from my house at the time, but it's since moved. I ended up going to train with Bobby Goulding, who used to play rugby. And then it was training with Bobby that gave me faith back in my body, because then I could see like progression. I could see that I can do that, and I can lift heavier, and I can do this quicker. And it's a very sort of like inclusive space, because there's all people of all different ages and all different shapes and sizes, and it doesn't matter what everyone else is doing. It's you're trying to be yourself. You're trying to do your best set or your best reps. It doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. And I used to find those sorts of spaces to be really intimidating, and it's just not there. We call it our gym home and our gym family, because that's exactly what it is. But that is one of my non-negotiables. I train 4 days a week. If I don't, like my head takes a good wobble for it. Like, you know, if I'm sick or anything, I have to say I can't train. Oh, I really, really hate it. Yeah. But when I'm there, like, it doesn't feel like exercise, because my friends are there, and like we have a laugh. And Gerard and I train together like 2 or 3 days a week. So it's nice for us to have that time. And then sort of Grace comes with us sometimes, especially on the weekend. And to me, it's really powerful that she can watch me be strong and have fun, and that she can see me like sort of hold my own against her dad and stuff like that. You know, I'm always very grateful to Bobby that he gave us a space where we can do that. But that's one of my sort of, like, I plan all of my week around my gym sessions, because if I don't do it, I feel crap in my head and in my body. So you know, why would I not do it? And then it's sort of a knock-on effect then, because once I train and I think, well, I've trained really hard, I've put my body through a lot, I need to now nourish it with so like I may want to eat crap, but actually what my body needs now is some decent protein and some veggies, so it makes me eat a little bit better and sort of think about my nourishment. And then at the end of the day, then it gives me something to write in my gratitude journal that I lifted this amount, or I did so many reps. And then like I have my gratitude journal beside my bed, and I have another journal downstairs, so I do a bit of journaling in the morning. I use because I know you've got the book there, the Mel Robbins format. So is it like see, hear, touch, and smell? I feel in one word. I deserve a high five, because, and then declutter your mind, and then 5 things you want to achieve and what small steps to achieve. And so I do that every single morning. So sometimes it's nonsense, like sometimes it's just drivel, and that's okay. but it needs to come out. But I just think, who am I hurting? Like, exactly. It's nobody's business. Like, so I do that. I have some little affirmation cards. I get up and I do all this before Gerard and Grace get up, because that's my time then to do it. And then I feel ready for my day, and then like sort of whatever the day holds, you know, I can cope with it. But those are my journaling and exercise really are my sort of foundation, like my cornerstone habits that I can't, and I won't budge on them. I just won't. And it doesn't matter what else is going on. I just everything else can wait until I've done those things.
Amazing. What a conversation for a bonus episode. Honestly, I cannot thank you enough for your honesty, openness, your generosity, just by you sharing your experiences, which, you know, have been incredibly painful, and you have dealt with them in the most inspirational way. And just the way that you, the way that us as a friendship group have been able to share that with you and share that with you each year has been really special. And like you say, you're privileged to feel part of, and knowing who Malcolm is.
And it's mental, because you never knew me before.
Exactly.
So you've only ever known this version of who I am, which blows my mind now, because obviously, like my mum and my sort of long, like my sort of 20-year friendship, and you know, there's been like some friendships, like, and some really, really close relationships that out the other side of it, like I'm so different that I'm not, like, people can't relate with me. So I have lost some friendships and some relationships, and I do get sad about it. But I think, you know, everything has a season and a reason. So you know, sometimes you're sort of flogging a dead horse if you're trying to keep up with a friendship or a relationship that's just
And you do change through the years, I think. You know, we're no matter what's happened to us in our lives, you're rarely the same person today. Yeah, you grow, and you're rarely the same person today that you were 5 years ago. So actually, when you find new people along the way that you like really connect with, really click with, as you say, become part of your tribe, then that feels right sometimes, you know, to maybe leave some of that older friendship in the past.
And there doesn't have to be any negative feelings about it. You can just sort of say,
this is where I am now.
And sort of like wish them well, and off you go. So I've had a few of those, because like I say, it was like a rebirth for me. And you're never going to come out of something like that the same. Exactly. You can't. You just can't.
Well, thank you so much. It's been amazing. We're going to have some lunch now, aren't we?
Yes,
staying. We're going to have some lunch. But thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. And if you need any support at all, we'll pop some stuff in the description for you.
Yeah, there is. Like, there's loads of local charities. Like, if you have any sort of like pregnancy or child loss through Liston Hospital, they have links with sort of like Cradle and Sands. And then there's the Ava Marie Foundation in the Willows. There's a couple of really good locals, and then there's a couple of really good national charities as well.
And we'll put all that in the description so people can access that. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
The KD, Nic KD, the original KD, as far as I'm concerned. The OG. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on Wellbeing with Manny in Conversation With, and thank you for being part of our community. It really is all for you, it's all purpose driven, and I really hope that you got something from the episode today. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to share it with anyone who you feel would benefit from hearing these open and real conversations. Please make sure that you are following and you are subscribed to make sure you never miss an episode, either on your app of choice or on YouTube. And if you can, please rate and review the channel. That would be so helpful, because it helps other people find us. And finally, just remember that it is all about talking. It is all about sharing. So think, reach out. Who will you have a conversation with? Have a fabulous week. See you next week.